Hi, this is Luann Wright speaking. Thanks so much for checking out my first SAS users blog. Today I'm going to talk about an automated grocery shopping list. I'll use the SAS Enterprise Guide project and prompts, and we'll transform an Excel workbook of an ingredient list to a consolidated shopping list for output and take directly to the grocery store. I'm calling this step 1 because I've already identified a few improvements that I'd like to make. Let's take a look. As with any project, a great place to start is with our data. Here I've displayed a data set in Excel workbook that I created manually with a few of my common recipes. The first column is the source column. This source helps me refer back to the book or website with the cooking instructions for the recipe, but this won't be used on our shopping list. The next column is the recipe name, and the multiple ingredients for a recipe are listed in column C. Then we have the amount and the unit of measure, which I call size. Then we have the number of servings for the recipe, which can vary by recipe. This workbook has many other recipes in the data set. I've pre-selected 3 of my husband's favorites: classic meatloaf, tater tot casserole, and White Castle hamburger pie. Now let's remember, the purpose of the project is to take this list of ingredients and output to a shopping list for me to take to the store. The reason why I don't want to just use this Excel workbook as it is, when I pre-selected these 3 recipes, I still have ground beef listed 3 different times. Furthermore, ground beef servings on each recipe is different. So if I took this list to the store and I wanted to cook for my family 3 servings, I would have to calculate in my head what the 3 servings for the 2 pounds for 8 servings converts to 3 servings. Then I'd have to do the same thing for the other recipes. And this gets complicated pretty quick. That's not something I want to do in the grocery store. So the 2 challenges that we would like to overcome in our Enterprise Guide project is the varied number of servings on each recipe, and then also I'd like to combine the ground beef into one line item in my final shopping list. Let's take a look at our Enterprise Guide project and run it. The first thing it does is prompt me to choose the recipes that I'd like to include in my shopping list. You can select them by clicking here and hitting the right arrow, and I've chosen classic meatloaf, tater tot casserole, and White Castle hamburger pie, the same 3 recipes we just looked at. And I'm going to leave the default number of servings as 4, but you can change this to any value you want. And if you wanted to cook the same recipes more than once, you could adjust your number of servings to account for that. For example, if you have 3 people and you want to cook everything twice, you can just say 6 servings. But I'm going to keep the default value of 4 and press run. So in the end, I've created a shopping list where instead of having ground beef listed on 3 different lines and having to calculate the number of servings, I now have one line item in my shopping list for ground beef. I know I need 3 1/3 pounds, and that's going to give me enough ground beef to make all 3 of my recipes for 4 people. So let's go back and take a look at the process flow and see what actually happened here. I won't go into detail of each one of these steps because you can go through that on your own and it's a great way to learn. But I will quickly explain my thought process and how this project was created. The first step was to import the data. This data set looks exactly like the Excel workbook that we started with. Next, I wanted to calculate the individual number of servings so that I could later adjust the number of servings to however many servings the user requested in the prompt. So here I've taken the amount and divided by the number of servings to get our individual serving calculation. The next step, I wanted to create a unique list of recipes to be used in the prompts themselves. Here's my recipe list, and you recognize this is the same list that showed up in the prompt in the beginning. The next step is really just an empty program because I like to have my name and date and some documentation somewhere. And I also tied my prompts to this program. So let's use this time to look at our prompts. The first one is to choose the recipes to include. And I will go through these in a little more detail. So the name of the prompt is choose underscore recipes underscore to underscore include underscore. Well, that's not the best name. I could definitely improve that next time I revise my program. But that's going to be the name of the macro variable that holds the values that we choose. So the displayed text that we saw in the prompt was choose recipes to include in shopping list. It does require a non-blank value, and we'll be able to use the prompt value throughout the project. It's a text prompt type. The user can select from a static list, and they can select multiple values, but they need to select at least one. A list of values will be used, and you can get this list by clicking on the Get Values. Once you click on Get Values, you'll need to click on the Browse and browse to the data set that you created with your unique recipe list. And once you select that, you can view the available values and select the ones that you want to include in your list. But I don't want to go through all that because my computer might hang up and ruin my recording. So I'm going to cancel that. The other prompt is called recipe1 underscore servings. You remember that in the beginning. We chose our recipes and we also said how many servings we wanted. So the displayed text was enter the number of servings for your chosen recipes. The description was just a reminder that the same number of servings was going to be used for all the recipes that were chosen. Our macro variable name will be recipe1 underscore servings. This will require a non-blank value and be used throughout the project. This is a numeric where the user enters the values, and the minimum value is 1, so it must be 1 serving. The maximum is 20 servings. This can be anything. I just used 20 to make sure that I didn't accidentally input 200 or something. The default value I used is 4, but again, you can choose anything you want. The next step is to calculate the requested number of servings. So now we've calculated an individual serving. We created a unique recipe list so that we could prompt the user for what recipes they wanted and then how many recipes they wanted. So now we're going to calculate the requested number of servings only for those recipes. So the first thing we need to do, let's go ahead and look at this task. First thing we need to do is filter our data set so that we're only including the recipes that were the user included in the when they selected it at the prompt. The other thing we're going to do is compute the calculated amount of servings, and then we'll also display the requested number of servings instead of what the original serving number was on the recipe. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's our data's been limited to only the 3 recipes we chose. We have the requested number of servings instead of the original recipe number of servings, and we have the calculated amount for each one. So we've adjusted our shopping list for the number of servings, but we still have multiple lines for ground beef and shredded cheddar cheese. So the next step, you've got it, it's going to be to create our shopping list by consolidating across records and our final data set. We only have 1 ground beef and we have 1 shredded cheese, and anything else that had a duplicate has been condensed. So this worked really great, but let's go ahead and go back to our data and talk about some of the other ways we might improve this. One thing to consider is the input of your data in the beginning. When I was inputting data I noticed that I had celery in 2 recipes. One of my recipes had 2 cups of celery. The other one had 1 stalk of celery. So I Googled how many stalks were in a cup, and I converted it when I made my data entry. So this is something that really wasn't a big deal, but if I start to grow my database of recipes regularly and continue to add things, it might be better for me to just incorporate something in my program that'll be able to convert those common units of measure to a standard unit of measure. So that's one improvement that I might make next. Another improvement would be the aesthetics for the output of the shopping list. You saw that it was just a SAS data set, so I could definitely make that more appealing. I might also want to add a column to this data set that indicates what sort of type of ingredient it is. So for example, I could use a store section column here, and then I could say canned goods or produce or deli or butcher, and then in the end when I output my shopping list, I could sort by the store section and have all of my produce all listed together and have all of my canned goods, all my butcher, deli, etc. All listed together, so I don't have to think about that at all. Another thing that I might want to do is to categorize by cooking type. You can see that I have some low carb recipes, I have some paleo recipes here, and some good old southern cooking in here too. So there's a whole lot of different types of recipes, and if I'm trying to stick to a diet, I might not even want to see those other recipes to tempt me, right? So it might be nice to say at the very beginning of my prompt to choose what type of cooking if I want to limit it at all. And last but not least, another useful modification for my next step might be to allow the user to input a different number of servings for each recipe on the list. So if they're going to have guests over and they're going to have a different number of servings for one of the recipes, it would be nice to be able to output that or include that in the prompt and account for that in the output. Although I do think that that's probably the least likely to be done, so I'll probably focus on these top 4 improvements before I get to that one. So thank you so much for checking out the blog. Please make sure that you stop by and check out the actual blog itself. And if you want to leave some comments, or if you want to send in your recipe for me to add to the database, then you can email me at luann.wright@sas.com. Thanks so much for stopping by. Next time, bye.